Yo, what the fuck is going down, everybody? It's your boy Sauceman X. I'm checking back at you niggas with another goddamn video today. But anyways, matter, back with another political video, goddamn bitch. And you already see this shit by the title. This video is obviously going to be about the things that's been going on in politics within this past week. And you already see this shit by the title. This video is obviously going to be about abortion, okay? And now Texas essentially banned abortions, okay, past 6 weeks in their state officially yesterday. This is obviously something that they've been, actually trying to, pass into law within the past few years, which is obviously a really great fucking thing. So I'm going to be talking about that and why life does begin at conception and why abortion is murder and therefore murder is wrong. I'm going to be talking about that and all the leftist hypocrisy within it and how leftists are basically supporting murder for absolutely no legitimate reason, even though they claim to support, saving lives, which literally is the ultimate form of hypocrisy. And I'm going to be exposing obviously more leftist hypocrisy within that. So I'm going to be talking about that and the entire COVID situation. I'm also going to be talking about the entire COVID situation with Ron DeSantis and how they're literally trying to blame him for absolutely no legitimate reason, as if he's solely responsible for all the COVID deaths, while also not holding any accountability to Democrat governors who are responsible for more deaths in their state per capita than people in Florida, which basically debunks the entire narrative that, Ron DeSantis needs to lock down the country more. We need to bring in more mask mandates, more fucking social distancing, even though it logically doesn't even make any sense when you actually take the time out to look at the statistics. So I'm going to be talking about that and all the leftist hypocrisy within that. So going on to the first point of this video, which is obviously the entire abortion situation. So as you already know, they basically banned abortion in Texas, which is really not much to say about it for us rational people who actually understand that murder is wrong and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this entire situation. So we already know it's obviously a big win for Texas, and we already know that the Supreme Court themselves, okay, the entire Supreme Court themselves also agrees that this is not unconstitutional, and this is actually obviously a really good decision considering the fact that it's actually saving lives. And just to briefly going through this entire situation, abortion is obviously murder, and I believe that talked about it in multiple videos. Abortion is obviously murder, which basically means that murder is wrong because life begins at conception. Life does not begin at birth, okay? It begins when you're actually experiencing a heartbeat, and of course when a woman's like 5 months into her pregnancy, I believe, the baby can actually feel pain. They actually have somewhat of a consciousness, and they can actually their heart's still beating, things like that. The organs are already almost fully developed. So we already know that abortion is basically murder past 6 weeks, because life, I believe, is defined by a heartbeat, because if your heart is actually beating, you are technically alive. If your heart stops beating, you are technically dead. So we already know that it's obviously a life begins at conception. I believe it's already been scientifically proven, and therefore abortion is murder because you're actually taking an actual life for absolutely no legitimate reason. So therefore you do not have a right to murder your children. So we already know that this obviously makes perfect sense to go in and ban abortion. And obviously the only counter argument that leftists have to say is obviously to go in and deny science, which is funny because leftists claim that we're the ones who deny science as it pertains to this COVID pandemic, even though they can't even quantify exactly what we're being anti-science on, yet they themselves are actually denying the fact that life begins at conception, just to continue to push a propagandistic left-wing narrative to support abortion so they can go in and deny science and justify taking human lives, which we already know it literally makes absolutely no fucking sense, okay? It's literally just based in hypocrisy. And also considering the fact that leftists obviously want to go in and justify murdering children, they basically cannot even take the moral high ground, which is another point we needed to get into. There's literally no reason for them to take the moral high ground in anything. There's no way that they can go in and try to say that something's wrong with us just because, we don't want to take the vaccine, for example, because they claim to want to save lives, when they themselves literally support murdering millions of people, okay? Millions of confirmed human lives before they're even born, for absolutely no legitimate reason, just so they can continue to push a left-wing narrative in support of abortion, which literally is causing millions of people's lives to be at stake every single year before they even have the opportunity to be born, while they're, going in and saying that they care about human lives. So this basically proves the moral depravity of the left and how they think they have a right to murder children while claiming to have the moral high ground over conservatives who simply are going against the entire coronavirus narrative, which obviously proves their hypocrisy even more, which literally makes absolutely no fucking sense. And of course, you have all the other arguments, the pro-choice arguments like, my body, my choice, which again also makes absolutely no fucking sense, because that's exactly what we're saying with this entire vaccine narrative. And choosing not to take a vaccine does not directly kill anyone, so there's no hypocrisy there on our part. Meanwhile, they're the ones who try to make it seem like women have a right to their bodily autonomy, but they don't think anyone else, including other women, don't have a right to their bodily autonomy as it pertains to taking the vaccine, which literally makes absolutely no fucking sense, which proves that they don't actually support bodily autonomy. They just support murdering children for absolutely no legitimate reason, which continues to prove their hypocrisy. And obviously another reason for why this is obviously a great idea from a pragmatic and a moral standpoint is obviously because this will obviously probably disincentivize some Democrats from moving to the state of Texas, because we already know there's a lot of people who unironically are liberal from California, for example, or another blue state, who are moving to a red state, and they're probably going to go in and vote for the same policies that caused them to leave the blue state they went to begin with, which is obviously pure hypocrisy. And they're trying to come into Texas and actually actually turn Texas blue, which is obviously going to turn Texas into another California, and a lot of people are obviously going to want to leave the state, which literally makes no sense. So from a pragmatic standpoint, it makes sense to go in and ban abortions to actually stop people from coming to the state of Texas, to actually prevent people from voting Democrat, which obviously is a great idea, because if you don't like the fact that, abortion is illegal in Texas, go to a different state. Go to a blue state where you can get an abortion and can murder your children for absolutely no legitimate reason. And this is obviously great from a moral standpoint, because it's going to be saving lives, okay? And the funniest part about this entire situation is that this entire bill of banning abortion is going to most likely, if it actually works and people don't get abortions before 6 weeks, they're actually going to go in and save more black lives than anybody on the left has ever done within the past 50 fucking years, okay, or the entire history of the Democratic Party if you actually look at it. So we already know this literally makes absolutely no sense. People on the left try to make it seem like they stand for black lives, they support black lives despite wanting to segregate 70% of black people from society because of vaccine passports, which makes absolutely no sense. And they want to take millions of black lives per year that didn't even have the chance to be born yet, for absolutely no legitimate reason, without any logical argument, just so they can, continue to push a left-wing narrative. So this, unironically, is actually going to save more black lives and save more children's lives, which is obviously great from a moral standpoint. So we already know abortion is murder and murder is wrong. Okay, it's not necessarily your body, your choice, because there's another body inside of that body, and you're basically killing it for no reason, even though it's already scientifically proven to be a human life. But of course, leftists are going to be anti-science, deny the actual truth. So we already know this is obviously a great thing. And of course, the next point we need to get into is obviously that this is not a violation of the Constitution, okay? There's nothing that says in the 14th Amendment, I believe, which is what they're saying. They're basically saying that the 14th Amendment guarantees the right to abortion. It literally says nowhere in the 14th Amendment that women have a right to have an abortion. It was just that entire court ruling, that concerned Roe v. Wade, which is a subjective interpretation of the 14th Amendment, to say that abortion is illegal, which obviously we've been saying for the longest time that that was an illegitimate court, ruling, and the Supreme Court should obviously overturn Roe v. Wade to make abortion illegal throughout this entire country, because abortion is murder and murder is wrong, which is what we've already established. So we already know we just need to overturn Roe v. Wade, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. And the Supreme Court already determined that this entire abortion bill is obviously not unconstitutional because they ruled in favor of it. So we already know there's literally no constitutional ramifications for this entire situation. And it's funny because the same people all of a sudden pretend to care about the Constitution when they themselves are literally wanting to violate the Second and Third Amendment and the First Amendment for absolutely no legitimate reason, which basically proves their hypocrisy. They don't actually care about anything that they claim to. So this literally makes absolutely no fucking sense. So going on to the next point of this video, which is obviously the coronavirus hypocrisy that's also coming from the left, which basically proves that what they support as it pertains to their attempt to try to slow the spread of the coronavirus isn't even based on science at all, and the literal statistics actually prove that it's not based on science at all. So we already know I'm going to try to be careful when I talk about this, because YouTube might try to delete this for medical misinformation, probably would, but we'll see what fucking happens. But we already know you literally have a lot of leftists who obviously constantly say on multiple occasions, saying that, we need to lock down this entire country, and I've obviously talked about this in multiple videos. We need to lock down this entire country. We need to, enforce mask mandates. We need to bring in social distancing. We should force people, children, okay, literal children who, might be some ramifications for this, children forced to wear masks inside of schools to slow the spread of the coronavirus, even though you're not engaging in social distancing, which obviously is a logical fallacy and doesn't make any sense, because if social distancing was so effective, or if masks were so effective, why do you need social distancing? And obviously if social distancing was so effective, why do you need masks? The entire thing doesn't make any sense, and there's still no proof that masks are 100% effective, and there's yet to be any study to suggest that people wearing masks just magically decreases the spread and brings it down to 0% just because you have a piece of cloth over your face. Okay, there's no proof that it's 100% effective, but they want to force people to do it anyways, even though the science doesn't actually back it, which is why they're going against people like Ron DeSantis. And this is obviously not because of science per se, it's obviously because they want to control people's lives, and they want to go in and push their authoritative agenda to bring in more authoritarianism so they can continue to say, to continue to basically control people's constitutional rights, but under the guise of public health, when in reality, even if it was about public health, it also has some malintent into it to try to go against people and obviously, kind of control their fucking lives for no reason. And basically the state of Florida, okay, if you actually look at the statistics of the state of Florida, it actually proves that the entire mask mandates are not necessary, and it obviously proves that the lockdowns are not necessary to slowing the spread of the coronavirus. And basically anything that the left is advocating for or criticizing Ron DeSantis for has absolutely nothing to do with slowing the spread, because their solutions don't even work. And the statistics literally prove this. So if you actually look it up, I believe you can look it up on Google, COVID deaths per state in this country. If you actually set it to per 1 million people, so if you were to even everything out to actually have a fair comparison, and you actually were to do per capita, so per 1 million people, and you look at the COVID death rate within the past 30 days per 1 million people in every single state in this country, Ron DeSantis, okay, Ron DeSantis' Florida, I believe, is like at number 26, okay, like, you know, I believe in the middle of the pack in COVID deaths. And if you actually look into the statistics even further and actually do basic math and basic research, which a lot of leftists apparently don't know how to do, you actually find out that I believe that there's like 15 states, okay, I believe that there's about 15 Democrat-run states that have higher death rates, okay, they have higher deaths of the coronavirus and more coronavirus deaths within the past 30 days per 1 million people in their country, in their state, than Ron DeSantis does in Florida. So basically states that have more fucking lockdowns, like states like California, for example, states that have infinitely more lockdowns, infinitely more mask mandates, blatant violations of the First Amendment, you know, completely locking everything down, bringing in, you know, social distancing, you know, rules, the most fucking lockdowns in the country, still per capita has much more deaths of the coronavirus. So despite doing everything that the left wants Ron DeSantis to do, and apparently that's going to slow the spread and stop people from dying of COVID, it actually is implemented more so to a much bigger extent in Democrat-run states, and yet those Democrat-run states have higher deaths of the coronavirus, while Ron DeSantis is completely in the middle of the pack as it pertains to coronavirus death, which is actually impressive, okay? Because obviously in Florida, there's virtually nobody wearing masks, nobody social distancing, nobody, you know, apparently there's not that much mask mandates in schools, and yet there's still less people dying from the coronavirus per capita within the past 30 days compared to all these other Democrat states like New Jersey, New York, California. The states with the most lockdowns still have the highest levels of death of the coronavirus and the highest vaccination rates. Okay, people try to say that we should mandate vaccines to stop people, you know, to stop the spread of the coronavirus, but yet, you know, California has a much higher vaccination rate than people in Florida, yet people in Florida, you know, the death rate is still lower in Florida with a lower vaccination rate. So this entire situation basically debunks everything that they're talking about, and they're essentially taking anecdotal instances of people dying of the coronavirus in Florida just to continue to spread leftist propaganda. And obviously the main reason why they're doing this is because they want to hurt his chances in 2024, which basically proves their hypocrisy even more, because when Trump was president, they were basically saying, you know, every single death of the coronavirus, everything was Donald Trump's fault. Okay, every single thing that, you know, everything was Trump's fault. You know, every time someone died of the coronavirus, even if it was something deliberately executed by people like Andrew Cuomo throwing people in nursing homes, it was still Donald Trump's fault for his death. But as soon as Biden becomes president and still a few 100,000 people die of the coronavirus, they're all of a sudden blaming it on only Republican governors that have less deaths, you know, than all these Democrat-run states, which basically proves that they're shifting the blame to promote their own agenda that's obviously based in hypocrisy, which literally makes absolutely no sense. So this essentially proves that, you know, basically biofascism, turning an entire country to a police state and locking people down, is not actually going to slow the spread of the coronavirus. You know, bringing in mandatory vaccinations is not going to slow the spread of the coronavirus. Nothing of what the left is actually doing or actually wanting to do is actually going to stop people from dying of the coronavirus. And the literal statistics that you can actually do prove that, but people don't seem to do basic fucking research on it. But obviously it's because they want to hurt his chances because he's a potential 2024 candidate. So they, you know, and he's obviously not complying to, you know, basically what fascists like Joe Biden want to do as it pertains to mandatory vaccines, mandatory mask mandates, doing all these things that are not even based in something that would actually slow the spread of the coronavirus, as the actual statistics have proven, which literally makes absolutely no fucking sense. And obviously, you know, it's even more impressive when you actually look at, you know, the cases of the coronavirus in Florida, because, you know, Florida has the second most old people, you know, throughout the entire country as it pertains to, you know, old people who live in these particular states. And it's also, you know, I believe there's like high population density, I believe, lots of population density, kind of like in New York, you know, in Florida, but yet there's still not that much of transmission of the coronavirus per capita to the point where it leads to more people's deaths compared to states like California that has more lockdowns. This obviously doesn't even make any sense. So it's actually pretty impressive that Ron DeSantis actually did the job that he did, you know, to actually, you know, vaccinate the people who actually needed it and allowed people to engage in actual freedom, while also not actually increasing the spread of the coronavirus to the point where it actually exceeds a lot of these Democrat-run states that are implementing the ideas that the left wants Ron DeSantis to implement, which basically proves that they don't actually support slowing the spread, in ways that will actually not, compromise people's personal freedom for absolutely no legitimate reason, because they actually want to control you, and they don't actually want to implement safety. And even if they did, they would act, it would still be based in authoritarianism, which is why they're going against people like Ron DeSantis for absolutely no legitimate reason. So we already know that's the fucking video. Tell me what you think in the comment section of this shit. It's just my entire opinions on this entire situation about the things going on in politics within the past week. It's your boy Sauceman X. I'm checking the fucking out of your piece.